Hello everyone. So when it comes to weapon balance in TF2, there are obviously differences between a casual setting and a competitive setting. Just overall, in a competitive setting, of course, you have differences in like class limits and weapon whitelists even, which I'm sure many people already know about, and some people have like strangely strong opinions about. But another big difference is just that in a competitive setting, everyone is trying to win, and also people are communicating is another big one. Communicating and trying to coordinate with teammates is a big difference in a competitive setting versus a casual setting. So overall, you tend to have some powerful weapons get abused more often from better players, which can lead to some disconnect for people, or at least it can seem silly to them, for example, that a weapon like the cow mangler might be banned in competitive, when in a casual setting, it's really not that great, all things considered. And especially like if you're playing with random crits or something, you might even prefer stock. So yeah, there's some element of, you know, better, more competitive players that are trying to win are going to look at new ways to abuse these weapons in order to do so in a way that, you know, you just aren't going to see as much in a casual setting. So that's not too surprising. But what is surprising is when there's weapons that are particularly powerful in a casual setting that actually just aren't good in a competitive one. And that's what I want to focus in on today. So I have some examples of a few weapons that are really powerful in a casual setting, but are comparatively less so in a competitive setting. These are the weapons that people... Oh, my med is lagging out here. These are the weapons that people are surprised to hear. Like, wait, that's not banned? I thought you guys like banned everything that's too good or something, and that seems like super strong, but it's not. So yeah, I suppose first things first, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, because I did briefly look at the weapons I wanted to talk about. I think a good one to start is with the pyro. We're going to start with the phlogistinator. So the phlog is, for many people, one of their most hated weapons in TF2 because it can be extremely powerful. Of course, you know, oftentimes a little risk-free as well, because you can just pair it with a reliable afterburn secondary, such as the detonator or scorch shot or even flare gun. Just play very passively, very safely in order to build that charge, and then you just have permacrits, which can, in some cases, just wipe entire teams. In a competitive setting, this is clearly not the case, for a multitude of reasons. So for starters, pyro is just a very counterable class, and yeah, does not do very well against stickies or scouts, which are two of the mainstays of the format. So not pairing up well against those bodes very poorly for pyro. But also, pyro's main utility in sixes, because the class does actually provide a fair amount of utility in denying soldier bombs and denying spam, but both of those are air blast dependent. So foregoing air blast entirely makes you a lot less successful as a pyro overall, and as a result, it's just not that effective. That being said, I mean, there's still some phlog clips out there in sixes settings. I know a very funny one from a Goblin Zone season, taking a phlog Uber into the other team, and Jay Hunpei, who many of you know is, you know, one of the best players of all time, was on medic on the other team and actually dropped to it because the damage just came in so much faster than he expected. So there's definitely some funny use here and there of it, but overall, definitely a much less powerful option, all things considered, for what a pyro excels at in a competitive setting. On top of the fact that, you know, when you're communicating, you know where the pyro is. You know if the pyro is even on phlog. Like, a lot of the time, that's something that gets spotted and called. And, you know, teams are going to try their best to avoid giving that pyro a charge. And also, a pyro is going to get called out when they're using it a lot of the time. Like, you might have to mask the phlog taunt sound so as to kind of disguise the fact that you're flogging around a corner or something like that. But overall, yeah, flog, definitely not nearly as powerful in a competitive setting as it is in a casual setting. Next one I want to talk about is actually still a pyro weapon, and it's the scorch shot. Another one of the most hated weapons in the game, because, honestly, maybe people are going to hate me for this, but I don't really get the scorch shot hate. It's just seems, like, don't get me wrong, it is just effortless afterburn shit. But, the way I see some people talk about it, it sounds like the end of the world, where, like, you're always going to get direct hit by it and hit with the mini crit, like, afterwards and all that, which isn't my experience with the weapon. It just kind of seems like free spam, which is annoying, don't get me wrong. But in a competitive setting, definitely nothing special. It does have the unique ability of knocking players back, but as a pyro, so does your air blast. So I suppose it has some niche utility as a uber denial tool from range. And I do think some formats do have it whitelisted for that reason. But overall, it's definitely nothing too powerful, and a lot of pyros will opt to use the detonator instead, because the detonator, in my opinion, is more reliable afterburn, actually. It's harder to use, because you actually have to det it properly, but you don't rely on splash damage to get afterburn. You can just hit an entire area or an entire choke point with afterburn very reliably, which is nice. And also, the detonator is a much better mobility tool. So if you're playing pyro on Gully Wash Last, for instance, this map that we're watching in particular, actually, you might be trying to rotate between doors to try and stuff the door that the combo's going. And if you're playing to stuff River and then the other team decides to rotate and go Shutter, well, it's just a detonator jump away, and it's going to be harder on the scorch shot. So, again, another example of a weapon that, in a competitive setting, not nearly as strong or hated, for that matter, as it is in a casual setting. What is next on the list? I'm going to tab out, actually. Sorry for the pause here. I could talk about loose cannon. Loose cannon is a lot less powerful in a 6 setting, but that wasn't what I was planning to. Next, I actually do want to give an honorable mention here to the Wrangler, which, by all effects, is completely busted in a competitive setting, don't get me wrong. Or a 6 setting, rather. It is permitted in Highlander, as far as I'm aware. So there's that. But it's arguably less powerful comparatively than it is in a casual setting, where just one engineer with a Wrangler can, like, hold down everything. In a competitive setting, you definitely have a higher standard of focus fire, as well as, you know, people more willing or more capable of, like, focusing down an engineer that's trying to wrangle a gun, etc. It's, of course, still whitelisted, because it is still very problematic, as I've talked about in my whitelist video. It just makes holding last way easier, and a motivation for banning a decent chunk of the weapons, actually, that are banned in competitive, is they just make last way too easy to hold. So yeah, a little bit less powerful in a competitive setting, just because the focus fire and coordination does mitigate the power of it a little bit, but definitely still extremely powerful. You know, not really surprising anyone. Wrangler is powerful. So that being said, there is an engineer weapon I do want to talk about next, which is not the Wrangler, what is the gunslinger? I'm forgetting what it's even called. So mini sentries can, in some cases, just single-handedly make a casual game unfun for a lot of people, especially like maps like Koth. Koth is, for me, the most fun game mode to play in a casual setting, up until teams just start spamming minis, and then it just becomes miserable. Because they are very effortless to drop down, and when there's just so many players in the server, you're oftentimes gonna get value out of them, and people are not gonna be coordinated. They're not gonna know exactly where those sentries are, and they're not gonna be super prudent about taking them out, so people are just gonna kind of continue to wander into them for the entire duration of the game. Now, as you might expect, in a setting where people are communicating, coordinating, and, you know, actually trying to counter their opponents and do what they can to win, mini sentries really, really fall off. On top of the fact that any soldier will be able to spam a mini down in 2 rockets from anywhere on the map, which is really easy to do, and soldiers are in no short supply in a competitive setting. But also a demo can just take out any single mini with just 1 pipe or 1 well-placed sticky. So when it's so effortless for literally half of a team to take out a mini before it can even out-damage them and get a kill or something, it serves more as a kind of temporary zoning tool, or like a nuisance kind of zoning tool that you do see sometimes, to be fair. In fact, actually, Advanced in a prior season was won off of, in no small part, a mini sentry engineer, which, truthfully speaking, was just a tilt pick. After losing a bunch of rounds on Bagel, they just started running Pyro and Mini Engineer, but it worked. I mean, you know, a mini on the pack or something can pick off a weak player trying to go get that health pack, and you can get actual utility out of denying players space and map control without committing a little more resources to it. They can't just run around for free. They have to be a little more careful about that. And in some cases, you do see Mini Engineer ran on Clear Cut. Again, the cases where you tend to see a full-time engineer is, you know, no surprise, more in Koth settings where the lack of mobility in the class is just not nearly as much of a detriment, because it's a more stationary game mode overall. But I don't want to be overselling the use of Gunslinger Engineer. It is extremely niche and extremely uncommon to see in a serious setting. And it's in no small part because in a competitive setting, Gunslinger and Mini Sentries are just not nearly as powerful as they are in a less organized, more chaotic casual setting. So yeah, that's it for Engineer. I suppose I could talk about the Frontier Justice as well, which is potentially extremely strong in a casual setting because, of course, in a casual setting, your sentries are going to be getting a lot of kills, and also there's going to be a lot of players for you to shoot at, versus in a competitive setting, the gun doesn't get kills so often, and I'm talking now about a level 3 sentry gun on last. If you are sacking into this gun, then yes, it will get some kills, and you do see the Frontier Justice still get used, of course. It's just not as powerful, I suppose. Okay, next we were going to talk about... Oh, you know what is a good one to talk about is the Bazaar Bargain. I wasn't even thinking that going into this. Because a lot of people, I've heard, like I've seen comments in my comment section talking about like the Bazaar. Oh, what was it? It was on the whitelist video where I'm talking about how people tend not to like unlocks that make Sniper stronger. I think it was probably in reference to like the Machina or something. Maybe the Durati. I don't recall. But someone commented, like quoting that and being like, what about the Bazaar Bargain? Because in a casual setting, that is considered like the crazy sniper rifle that you just snowball out of control, right? That is very much not the case in a competitive setting. And I think it's totally allowed in Highlander as well, which is a format where snipers get a lot more kills than in sixes. In sixes, a sniper is not going to reliably get many kills. And in fact, most of the time you're running a sniper, you're looking to get one kill, really. You're playing a sniper in the forwards to kill the medic. You're playing a sniper into last to maybe kill a guy on the door and then peek deeper to kill the medic. Like, you're not expecting to go on very long kill streaks as a sniper. You're very much trying to get, you know, 1 or 2 really important picks that your team can then leverage for a strong advantage or for a round or something like that. So the Bazaar Bargain, which is, let me look at the stats real quick. Bazaar Bargain, which is overall worse. Do I even have one? I do. Yeah, way slower charge rate. Oh, and you'd need 2 kills to break even, if I'm reading that correctly. So yeah, you're not really expecting to get more than 2 kills on Sniper in a sixes game per life. And if you are, then it's like an exceptionally slow game, or you're just playing a lot of Sniper and maybe should switch off and get more value out of that or something. But yeah, Bazaar Bargain definitely way less powerful in a competitive setting than casual, and as a result, you really never see it get used in sixes because it is overall a downgrade, actually. So that is the Bazaar Bargain. And next, we'll wrap things up with a couple of spy weapons. So many of you maybe expect to see this coming, but the kunai, not very good in a competitive setting for a couple reasons. So in a sixes environment, spy is first and foremost not going to be getting many chain stabs. If they do, that's like clip worthy because just in and of itself, because it is extremely uncommon and very hard to pull off. And a lot of the time, whether you get a stab or not as a spy is really just 100% up to whether the opponent knows you exist or not. When I say 100%, like, of course, you see trick stabs happen here and there. It's very cool when they do, but by and large, the vast majority of spy plays are dependent on the spy not being discovered and not known about. That being said, a spy can still get a stab even when someone spots the spy in the cases that they are spotted while going for that stab and you can't kill the spy fast enough, or you can't really communicate fast enough that because of course any voice communication client you're using has at least some delay. And also there's just reaction time delay. So spies usually have this kind of hidden, buff is not the right word, but just some hidden advantage from when you can actually truly be spotted and when the other team is actually alerted and aware and playing such that you're spotted, or playing in a way that you're spotted, right? And in cases like that, the only thing that really thwarts you in that timing window between you getting called out and it being registered that you got called out is if you can actually die in that time. So having 60 HP does actually matter a fair amount. Because, of course, the player can just kill you. You can die in one pipe. You can die in just like any decent scattergun shot. And that's a big deal. It's not that rare for a stock spy, for instance, to eat a pipe or something and then get the stab on the medic, like the instant afterwards. So that lowered health is a big deal. On top of the fact that spy most of the time dies immediately after a stab, means that, yeah, you are just very unlikely to get much value out of that buff. On top of the fact that even if that buff helps you escape, it's still not that great for you because the other team knows you're on spy, which is a disadvantage. You'd rather, spy relies so much on the element of surprise that when you're stuck on spy and the other team knows about it, a lot of the time, unless you can find a crazy timing, a lot of the time you're just down a player, effectively. So yeah, kunai, a lot worse in a high communication, high coordination, generally higher skill environment. And as a result, much, much worse than casual, where a lot of people do have a lot of trouble with it, where, some random person that has 50 hours in the game and installed like 2 weeks ago just decides to feed a spy a health pack, and then they get to run away for free, even though you sticky pipe them or something for 180 damage, right? So yeah, that is another example. And the last one we have to talk about is the Dead Ringer. So the Dead Ringer is really powerful in casual because it's essentially just a get out of jail free card. And for that reason, a lot of people aren't a fan of a spy just being able to use it and then tank a bunch of damage and get out of jail for free. In a competitive setting, this is absolutely not the case for a multitude of reasons. So for starters, I've already alluded to a bit of what makes a spy play work. Another thing that makes a spy play work that kind of almost doesn't even need to be said because it's kind of just assumed is you need to get behind people to properly backstab them. Which is an issue, because if you could just get behind people without being invisible, then you would have flank members getting behind very consistently. Where a flank member getting behind is more often than not a failure of the other team in spotting. And spotting is a big deal. And most standard holds as well as standard pushes are going to take that into account. You're going to have certain players go certain places so as to spot everything and make sure people aren't just getting behind. You can still get behind, of course. I mean, there's, strategy and counterplay to how the flank plays and getting behind and all sorts of things. But it's not a reliable plan. And especially as a spy, trying to get behind unspotted without being able to cloak is a real problem. Faking your death is not really an option either, for all sorts of different reasons. Like you could argue, I don't know, there's always like theory crafting about what if you like disguise as the demo or as your own demo and then like fake your death and then they try and put like there's all plenty of theory crafting around Dead Ringer, stuff like that. But as far as just faking a death goes, there's a lot that makes it really easy to check. One being like picking up ammo, but the big one is just the match HUD. Like you're going to be shown as respawning very, very quickly, and any like competitive player that is experienced is going to immediately notice that and be like, yeah, that's not real. That is way too fast of a spawn to be legit. On top of the fact that like the decloak is so loud, and then even then like you're going to have no ability to cloak to sneak off. It's just overall way worse. And again, spy, and this is kind of reflected from the kunai as well, is just spy doesn't really benefit from strong escape tools in a competitive setting, because escaping isn't really that advantageous for you because it's more so about not being spotted. So spies don't mind dying that much actually after getting a kill, just because it means you get to switch off of spy and you no longer have to deal with that disadvantage of the other team knowing that you have this, at that point, almost useless class, right? Because a spy that people are aware of needs to do so much to get value in a competitive setting where people are communicating maybe where they are, where they were last spotted, when they expect them to go for a play, all sorts of things. So these escape tools just tend to not be as powerful for the class in a competitive setting. But yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head here. I hope that was entertaining. Just some examples of these really powerful weapons that a lot of casual players love to theory craft different changes, balance changes, nerfs, all sorts of things, because they are very powerful in these settings, but in a competitive setting, definitely not problematic. If anything, pretty weak for some of these, and for many, just straight up downgrades in the case of, Dead Ringer versus either of the other watches, or Bazaar Bargain versus stock, stuff like that. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it was entertaining. My voice is so close to giving out, so I'm just going to call it there. And yeah, I will see you all next time.